Hi, everyone. My name is Lonnie Bloom. I'm an audit partner here at Withum, where we provide audit, tax, and advisory services. I'm a member of our technology practice and co-leader of our e-commerce group. Excited to be here today with Eric Bellomo, who's a research analyst at Pitchbook with a focus on e-com. So today's conversation will be all things e-commerce. We'll talk about current market conditions, what brands are doing to stay competitive, and our Q4 forecast. Eric, I'll pass it to you for a quick intro. Tell us a little bit about what you do at PitchBook on a day-to-day.
Yeah, first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. We have a ton to talk about. But yeah, day to day, so I sit on PitchBook's emerging technology research team. Our team covers about 20 verticals globally. I cover e-commerce, and I would say about half of my time day to day is spent on my research backlog. So that looks like a couple of different things. We do our core reports, which are quarterly updates, and then we also do topical or coverage. So, for example, I just did a note on generative AI in e-commerce. Process-wise, it varies, but this is a lot of interviews with investors and clients sometimes, startups. And I do a lot of client requests for presentations and data, ad hoc press work, things like this. Lots of reading, so definitely not bored on a day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I always get some great insight from you every time we chat, so really appreciate the time. We'll jump right into it. What's been top of mind for me this year has been this battle between top line revenue and profitability. We're seeing sort of a priority shift for companies to develop a path to profitability, and the conversation about top line revenue becomes secondary. So Eric, what have you been seeing with brands that you're working with? Has that conversation sort of shifted from revenue to this path to profitability?
Yes, and I think this conversation occurs on a probably a near daily basis for both of us. And I'd even maybe take it a step farther and say this is a trend across the totality of the e-commerce ecosystem. So not just with consumer-facing brands, but also with a lot of the technology providers or enablement platforms that I work with and speak with as well. So across the board, top line revenue growth on its own doesn't really cut it anymore. And investors are absolutely prioritizing profitable ventures, business fundamentals. This kind of growth at all costs mentality has kind of gone by the wayside. So the high flying direct to consumer days of kind of the earlier in the decade, the outlier VC activity we tracked in 2020 and 2021, where capital's readily available and consumer discretionary spending is relatively healthy. These days are largely in the rear view mirror.
Hmm.
And of course, there's a lot of trends that impact this direction, but some of the big ones that are regularly occurring in my conversations include iOS updates and other privacy centric developments, which complicate targeting and attribution. Lower barrier to entry for many brands simply increases some of the competitive challenges as well. Supply chain disruption has eased recently, but is still, I think, in the back of many of our heads and was inflating prices in a significant way. Monetary policy tightening is in the mix, changing consumer behaviors, and then obviously this reframing of direct to consumer as a channel, not just a business model. So those are some of the greatest hits. Again, there's a lot of macro factors impacting that, but yeah, it's a challenging time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of our clients sort of struggle with that, right? We're in this post-pandemic era, right? There was heightened growth with the pandemic, and now it's sort of a tough funding market, right? They're struggling,
Yeah.
and privacy policies and things like that. You hear about the cookie apocalypse, and I don't know if you have any insight into that, but it's harder and harder to, maintain information data for customers, right? So I don't know if you've heard about that or if I had any insight into that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's kind of part and parcel of this this conversation every day, and the ability to subsidize growth again, this growth at all cost mentality, and we'll kind of just throw money at Facebook ads or Instagram ads is just not really defensible on a unit economics standpoint any longer, which brings in all sorts of interesting conversations around where to invest and what's going to drive ROI from both advertising dollars and technology dollars. Um, and also kind of opens the door for a new class of startups built around granular data analysis and trying to aggregate data that lives in different places. So there's kind of that ever present tug and pull between macro environment changes and technology developments in response to that. So
Right.
again, certainly a lot to pay attention to at the very
Right.
least.
Right. Yeah, we've definitely seen a decline in VC activity, right? For D2Cs, it's become harder and harder for these companies to raise capital.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for founders as they're going out to the market with their brand? What makes their brand more attractive? Like, how can they go out to VCs? How can they go out and raise capital? And where do they focus their attention, especially in this tough funding market?
Yeah, the bar is undeniably higher. And one of the phrases that's stuck in my mind, I'm borrowing from Brian Sugar, who's an investor at Sugar Capital, a commerce-focused investor, and he's used the phrase borderline illegal distribution for what it takes in some cases now. And for better or for worse, when the barrier to entry is so low, and there's hundreds of competitors for mattresses, you name it. Investors in kind respond by needing to scour the categories for disruptive category defining brands who in some cases have borderline illegal distribution. So that said, there are some highly tactical steps to take. One of which is just rethinking some of the metrics we rely on. For example, looking at return on ad spend using gross margins or calculating lifetime value and profit, not revenue. Of course, being just generally highly conservative with cash, trying to extend runway. We've seen diligence cycles extend. Of course, retaining existing customers and looking to build community around product where possible is always a tactical recommendation as well. And this one may even be obvious, but I do think it's always worth reiterating, which is aligning the type of financing you're pursuing with your goals. So if you're trying to finance inventory versus marketing spend, those processes could be different, and the asks of investors could be different in kind. So for example, some investors will look at a pitch deck and ask to see just the amount that's spent on marketing costs, and if that's 20% or more of revenue, they'll walk away. So kind of being aware of those trends is important as well. Looking at alternative sources of capital, bootstrapping, bank loans, just being thorough in what funding sources you're evaluating is a recommendation. And one of the reasons I emphasize that is this is the most investor-friendly environment we've seen in a decade, and that's not even e-commerce or direct-to-consumer specific. That's VC specific. That's from our deal-making indicator. So, given how investor-friendly the environment is, and the challenges we're seeing in direct-to-consumer, being highly targeted with again these metrics and extending your runway is certainly critical. At the risk of rambling, one thing I do like to also mention is, that wasn't a super positive outlook. We're not at the end times either, though, and there are still brands raising capital for direct-to-consumer products. So a few I'd noted, Overnight Oats, $30 million Series A in January, Vacation Sunscreen, $7 million in July, Mad Rabbit Tattoo Aftercare, $10 million in March. So again, there's deals out there, but the process is certainly different nowadays.
Oh yeah, there's definitely still money on the table, right? There's still companies raising capital, and we have clients, every week raising capital. So there's still opportunities. It's just that conversation, right? The shift from top line revenue to profitability. There was a time that companies would dump money into Facebook, Instagram, social media, and marketing, and just to get new customers. But now it's maybe the shift is retaining those customers, right? What strategies do you have around that? We've all done it, right? We've all gone online, get an ad, and put something in our cart, and bought something once and never went back to that site, right? So that whole retention strategy is super important nowadays.
Yeah, and even getting someone into the cart and then actually getting them to click buy is a challenge. And in some ways, the funnel starts at the cart, right? And I used to be a product manager back in the day, so kind of scrutinizing how we're getting people from the cart to clicking buy is a battle. So yeah, always a lot of incremental improvements and considerations there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a consumer, you don't think of all the complexities that go into like an e-commerce business, but there's so much technology on the back end, right? And just
Yeah.
there's people, there's teams of people like thinking about how to monetize an abandoned cart, right? Because
Mhm.
there's abandoned carts everywhere, right? I probably have two or three abandoned carts
Yeah.
right now on my phone, right? So, yeah, super interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's always one of the kind of fun quirks of being in e-commerce is we all wear the consumer and professional hat, which is always tough when you get to like return something. It's like, man, I really don't need or want the thing I bought, but man, this is expensive for everybody behind the scenes, and that's always a tug and pull. But anyway, I
Oh
digress.
yeah, and you just did an interview recently with a company that focused on returns, right?
Yeah.
Streamlining the return process, and I thought that was super interesting because the cost of returns is something you don't think about, but these companies face such high costs with returns.
Yeah, and that plays definitely into the questions around, profitability and revenue growth, and returns are so expensive and largely broken that this is one of the topics we discussed, which is that the the scrutiny is starting to reach the warehouse and 3PLs and just trying to extract costs wherever possible. And for a long time, free returns was just kind of presumed as the cost of doing business. But there's all sorts of problems with that strategy.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, certainly a leg of the buyer journey that's well positioned for some innovation and disruption.
absolutely.